Today we're going to talk about the basic locations that you place your trees, what kind of watering schedule you're going to give them, and what kind of media that you're going to grow your bonsai trees, your juniper bonsai trees into. Juniper bonsai need full sun. Junipers do not grow indoors. If somebody told you a juniper will grow indoors, they lied. I have had literally hundreds of people bring their trees to my nursery and say, "What's wrong with my juniper?" Well, did you grow it indoors? Yes. Who told you can grow it indoors? I read it in a book, or I saw it on TV, or I watched a YouTube video. They lied. You can't grow junipers indoors long term. That said, I've had 2 people in the 17 years we've been in business that have successfully grown junipers indoors out of hundreds. Those 2 sweet old ladies, for some crazy reason, kept junipers alive more than a year indoors. They misted them twice a day, they watered them once a week, and those junipers were suffering. They didn't grow at all the whole year they were inside. It's almost like they went into a state of dormancy. As soon as they were brought outside or they were given to somebody, they died. Junipers get their strength from their foliage. They need to create photosynthesis. They need the dew. Junipers uptake a lot of moisture directly through their foliage. So they need to be not only outside in full sun. When you water the trees, you should water the foliage. You should have them out to where they get good circulation, where they get the rains, where they get the winds. They love the dew, they love the sunshine, they love the cold. They're hardy to about -10 degrees. Up in Michigan, they put them right out and they're loaded with snow over top, and they're still just out there all year. In the winter up north, they will get like a bronze sheen or a bronze color, almost like a reddish color, but it's not dead like it is if it's brown or crunchy. It's just winter dormancy. Usually below 40 degrees for extended periods of time. If you have it down in Central Florida, they almost don't stop growing in the winter. They really just continue to grow almost all year, although in the winter they will slow down and stop, which brings me to my next point. Junipers thrive in full direct sun. However, here in Central Florida, we have this really intense heat that's brutal. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll put actually a 20 or 30% shade cloth over the top, so it'll get full direct sun in the morning till about 11 o'clock. Then it'll be shady throughout the center of the day, and then it'll get full sun in the afternoon. That'll really kind of help the junipers kind of eliminate respiring too much moisture and stressing out. We had a couple of months back, we didn't have any rain, and it was a heat index of 106, and the junipers did suffer. When a juniper is suffering from the heat, it becomes more susceptible to a lot of the pests that are the bane of junipers here in Central Florida. And we'll talk about that next week. When we repot junipers here in Central Florida, I typically repot them before it gets too hot, especially if I'm doing work to them. The best time to repot a juniper here is January, February, and March. I usually stop repotting my junipers March 31st. I do not repot them in the middle of summer. However, certain people have said you can repot a juniper almost any time of year. You just got to make sure that you have strong foliage to help it in its recovery process. I don't follow that advice. I repot January, February, and March. And when I do repot, I do have a good amount of foliage on there to help issue roots. When I repot a juniper bonsai tree, I traditionally put that in 100% inorganic mix. There's a lot of different mixes you can use, and I'm not going to get into my soil or different soil blends, what's better than others. I will tell you that when we repot our trees here in Central Florida, I use black lava, scoria, red lava, scoria, akadama, and pumice equal parts. That's my mix. That's what I use. In the past, I've used lava rock, red lava, Haydite, which is an expanded shale, and calcinated clay with pretty good success. I've used lava rock with perlite and Haydite with pretty good success. However, the new mix that I have, honestly, they seem to grow the best so far. So that's the mix that we have, that's the mix we use, and that's the mix we sell. If it's a very large pot, I'll use a more coarse blend. If it's a smaller pot, 9 inches or smaller, I usually screen it between 1/16 and 1/4, taking out any of the dust. I do fertilize my junipers with not only a chemical fertilizer called Sun Coat if I'm developing the tree, but also BioGold if it's in a finished bonsai pot and has been wired and shaped and I'm trying to really refine it. But any organic will work. I just use the BioGold because we now have a source for it and it works very well. You can also use various types of, whether it be fish emulsion or blood meal, bone meal, cottonseed meal blend, or BioKing, or many other brands that are out there. The trick is to do it. Just make sure that you have a schedule and that you're fertilizing on a regular basis. Junipers really respond well to being well fertilized, especially once they're recovered from a repot. If you take a juniper and you wire it and you shape it and you style it and you repot it the same year, they really tend to suffer the following year. They don't do too much. They don't grow really vigorously. They kind of just sit there. If you wire it and shape it and style it and don't repot it that year and let it just recover a full season and then repot it the following year when it has a lot of strong foliage on it, it really seems to recover much better. Most people here in Central Florida tend to try to grow junipers like they grow their ficuses or their tropicals or a lot of the subtropical species like olives that we grow here. The stuff that we grow here is so vigorous and so strong, they kind of get spoiled. You can take a ficus with an 8-inch trunk and cut 90% of the roots off, and cut 90% of the top off, put it in a pot, and it'll sprout everywhere. And it'll, in fact, grow more vigorously being repotted. And in 2 or 3 years, you could have a nice solid head. Whereas with a juniper, if you cut the top real hard and you cut the bottom really hard and you put it in a pot, 30 to 50% of the time, you'll have a tree that'll suffer or it'll die. Sometimes it recovers and it does fine and you're like, oh, I can do that. Well, not necessarily. Junipers are a really strong and vigorous plant, but you gotta know how to properly take care of them. Another point in repotting your junipers before I get to the next topic is when you do repot a juniper, if you're getting it from that regular mom and pop nursery or you're getting it because it's hidden in the back and it's pot bound, you can't take that juniper, even January, February, March, and completely bare root it. It's not a good idea, because when you do that, a lot of times the juniper will do that same thing, whereas if you cut the top real hard and you cut the bottom real hard, it'll just kind of struggle. What you typically will do is you'll bare root like a third of it, and you'll leave the other 2/3 alone. And then the next year you you bare root the other third of it, and you leave the other third alone. And then the third year you repot the last one, and now you have it in your complete inorganic mix. It just takes time, and it also takes making notes, because you need to let yourself know, okay, I've repotted, this quadrant of this tree. It's a good idea to have a schedule on that. If it's been bare rooted over a period of years like we talked about, or if you've done it young like this and always had it in bonsai soil, you can water this tree sometimes the second time in the day to help keep the roots a little cooler, help it respire a little bit more moisture, and help it from drying out too much. Because in bonsai soil, the bonsai soil dries out pretty quick, especially when we get that 95, 98 degree weather. Junipers only need to be repotted once they're in that inorganic mix when they're just about full of roots and drainage starts slowing down. You don't have to repot a juniper every year or every other year. They don't really like their roots repotted, so it's a good idea to wait until the tree is partially pot bound or the drainage is slowing down before you get in there and repot. So, basic location, full sun, at least 4 hours of direct sun. Good mix, inorganic, well-drained mix. Watering schedule, water it sometimes twice a day when it's really hot, especially if we're not getting those afternoon rains like we get here in Central Florida. In the winter, you're not going to have to water nearly as often. Just keep an eye on it. You don't want it to ever get bone dry, but we're watering about 3 or 4 days a week when it's below 70 degrees here. We don't freeze like they do up north very often, but when we do, we leave our junipers right out. They're totally fine here. Coldest I've gotten since I've been in this nursery is 17 degrees, and I've never had an issue with any of the junipers struggling from that. Okay? Thanks for watching.